I24 News Defense Magazine. I'm Alon Ben David with your weekly review of security, intelligence and strategic affairs. In this edition, the Iran nuclear talks are about to reach another milestone. And as the International Criminal Court investigation looms, the IDF strives to prove that it can independently investigate itself. Let's begin. Israeli Prime Minister is warning that the world powers led by the US are approaching a deal with Iran over its nuclear program, which is considered a bad deal by Israel. The nuclear talks with Iran are behind Benjamin Netanyahu's planned visit to the US, which is already stirring great controversy in the US and Israel. More on the emerging deal, the progress of the talks, and the possible framework of the agreement in the next report.
A decade-old crisis over the Iranian nuclear program is reaching yet another deadline. Iran and the P5+1 countries have been negotiating a nuclear deal for some time. An interim accord was agreed to in November 2013. The first final deadline of July 2014 was pushed to November, when it was postponed again to March 2015, with all important technical details to be sealed by the 1st of July. The U.S. says any agreement should ensure it will take Iran at least a year to build a nuclear warhead if it so chooses. This limit will require a sharp reduction in Iran's uranium capacity. The U.S. is also believed to want Iran's enrichment capacity to be equal to the production capability of 4,500 centrifuges. Iran currently has about 10,000 operational centrifuges out of 19,000 installed. Iran is reportedly offering to freeze the current number of operating centrifuges for 3 to 7 years. Later, it argues it will have to increase its capacity tenfold or more, since its fuel supply agreement with Russia expires in 2021. This kind of capacity increase would significantly reduce the time required to produce weapons-grade uranium. For his part, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said any deal would need to see Iran halt all enrichment activity and is adamant in opposing the upcoming deal. Iran wants UN and US sanctions to be lifted quickly, but the P5+1 believe that should happen only in the final phase of any accord because they could not be quickly or easily reimposed. So what will happen next month? One possibility is no deal at all. Another is an additional delay or an agreement in principle only, with the details to be worked out later. For a final agreement to be reached, the West and Iran need to agree. President Obama and the Congress need to approve it, and the Iranian negotiators and Ayatollah Khamenei need to see eye to eye. Can all this happen and international concerns be overcome? That remains to be seen.
Joining me now via Skype is Dr. Ariel Levite, former Deputy Director General for Policy at the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission and Senior Associate for the Nuclear Policy Program at the Carnegie Endowment. Dr. Levite, you've been following the negotiations for quite some time now. How close do you think are the world powers and Iran to reaching a nuclear deal?
Well, not that much is in the public domain, but I think that based on the statements both sides are making, it seems that they're not close at all. That, however, doesn't mean that there won't be an agreement, because the Iranians, if they were to make the ultimate concessions necessary to get the agreement, will do it at the very last moment, or perhaps even a moment beyond that.
It seems like the Iranians are desperate for a deal and have no alternative, yet the Americans appear no less eager.
Well, the economic conditions in Iran would have suggested that that is the case. Their negotiating practice doesn't lend credence to that theory thus far. And what may explain it is that the Iranians typically fear that if they make concessions under pressure, they would reveal a weakness that would then be exploited by their partners to ask for more concessions. Beyond that, I think there is serious ambivalence about getting a deal from the top political leadership that has nothing to do with the parameters of the nuclear deal as such.
Can you try and outline for us the zone of possible agreement?
Yeah, I think that what the Iranians are looking at are a few thousand centrifuges that will keep on running certainly indefinitely, and that they would be allowed to scale up the size of the enrichment operation over time and not over a very long time, which is one of the stumbling blocks, that they would scale back for a while the activities on the research reactor, but then would be allowed to continue, that they would sustain the nuclear research and development program of more advanced centrifuges, that they would sign the additional protocol and allow the IEA to verify, but then that also means that there will be a lot of black holes remaining in terms of uncertainty over their enduring activities.
What you are describing is a de facto world recognition in Iran's nuclear capabilities as a threshold state.
Well, the Secretary of State has repeatedly said that the U.S. goal was to keep Iran 12 months away from having enough fissile material for an explosive device, which in practical terms means a year and a half away from a nuclear explosive device. That is indeed a threshold status.
How far is Iran from producing enough fissile material for a first nuclear device?
Well, the estimates vary, but I would say that it's roughly the same time frame.
Why is a deal that would legitimize Iran's nuclear capabilities is considered as the pinnacle of Obama's administration foreign policy?
Well, I think the Obama administration is seeking an agreement in part in order to kick the can down the road, in part to have free their hands to deal with other crises, and there are many, in part to solicit Iranian help in dealing with other crises in the Middle East, and there is no shortage of those, and in part to show that diplomacy actually pays off.
Do you believe the Americans are leading the negotiations in the right direction?
Well, my suggestion is that the U.S. focus on three parameters. Number one is getting the best deal possible, and that means probably holding back from offering the Iranian any more inducements that they've already offered, which would otherwise end up with a very problematic deal, if at all. Number two, should be ready to walk away from the negotiations if it turns out that the Iranians at the end of the day are not willing to make further concessions. And number three, should work on alternative and additional measures, both to complement the deal if one were secured and to make up for the absence of one if one could not be had.
Where would a future deal leave Israel, alone with its military option against Iran?
My assessment is that the monitoring agreements that would be put in place will be preferable to what we presently have. I think that the Israeli policymakers, when looking at this equation, are saying to themselves, well, we have to be ready, if it comes down to it, to do it by ourselves. That's not our preference. We prefer diplomacy, we prefer others to do it, but if it came down to it, we should always be ready to operate on our own.
Thank you very much, Dr. Levite.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Moving on, last week, Fatou Bensouda, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, announced the opening of a preliminary examination into Israeli actions in the Palestinian territories. Is this inquiry a game changer for Israel? And is the IDF prepared for combat in the international law arena? Before we discuss the issue further, here's a quick reminder of previous clashes between the IDF and international law investigations.
The International Criminal Court recently announced it will investigate alleged war crimes committed by Israel during the 2014 military operation against Hamas.
It is an option that we are seeking in order to seek justice for all the victims that have been killed by Israel, the occupying power.
Approaching the ICC is part of the ongoing Palestinian campaign for international recognition through acceptance to international bodies.
We're deeply troubled by the Palestinian action regarding the ICC. Hard as it is, all sides need to find a way to work constructively and cooperatively together to lower tensions, reject violence, and find a path forward.
This last move once again raised the issue of international legal scrutiny, its scope and power. The ICC is an independent international organization and is not a UN body. More than 120 countries ratified the ICC treaty, but Israel and the US are not among them.
It's absurd for the ICC to ignore international law and agreements under which the Palestinians don't have a state and can only get one through direct negotiations with Israel.
This is not the first time Israel and the IDF have been placed under the international law microscope.
It seems to me that it's in the interests of Israel and in the interest of Palestine, of Palestinians, that the truth be established and be established credibly and officially. It's in their interests.
The Commission's report condemned acts carried out by Israelis and criticized the IDF internal legal review.
The mission concluded that actions amounting to war crimes, and possibly in some respects crimes against humanity, were committed by the Israel Defense Force.
Another major legal investigation against Israel took place in 2010 following the Mavi Marmara incident, when IDF Navy forcefully stopped a flotilla heading to Gaza, protesting against Israeli blockade. The commission researching Israel stated the operation was legal, but described the force use as unreasonable. Similar allegations were also made after the recent Operation Protective Edge.
The fighting has raised serious questions about respect for the principles of distinction and proportionality in international humanitarian law.
We act according to our moral values, we act according to the Israeli law, we act according to the international law, and we have our judicial independent system, which is well known all over the globe.
In recent years, Israeli officials and former IDF officers have been legally threatened on numerous occasions and in many countries, such as Ariel Sharon in Belgium, Moshe Ya'alon in Canada, and Tzipi Livni in the UK.
When you are drafted to the military, you should be ready to sacrifice your lives to save the state of Israel. So it's part of the sacrifice.
And joining me now is retired Colonel Pnina Sharvit Baruch, a senior researcher for international law at the INSS and former head of the IDF International Law Branch. Thank you for joining us. How important is this measure by the ICC?
It is a significant measure because once the decision to start a preliminary examination, yes, not investigation, is made, that the process starts. But we don't have to be too concerned. We have to be calm about it because there's a lot of time, a lot has to be done between the decision to open this preliminary examination and between a decision to open an investigation. It's not an automatic decision. A lot can be done. A lot can happen in the meantime. So I think we should take it seriously, but we shouldn't be hysterical about it.
So it's not inevitable that the ICC will place its jurisdiction over the territories?
Well, there are good claims. Israel has good claims why the Palestine is not a state. According to international law, there are good arguments. However, the prosecutor did make a determination based also on a legal opinion of the legal department of the UN, which says that she does view them as a state for the purposes of the Rome Statute. So Israel can still go on claiming that this is not the case and might even have an opportunity to change this position maybe before the court itself. But with regard to the prosecutor, I think this has already made up her mind. So now we have to take it as a fact that this part has been already decided by her, and that there will be some kind of preliminary examination and deal with that.
But what you're telling is that Israel should cooperate and present its case and not boycott the ICC.
I think that it would be wiser to cooperate. It doesn't mean, the cooperation itself doesn't mean that we accept the jurisdiction. It doesn't mean that we cannot still claim that Palestine is not a state, that we can still say that we do not view ourselves as part of the party of the members of the Rome Statute. That's okay, but still we can still cooperate and show, first of all, that no war crimes were carried out, and mainly also that we investigate ourselves, and therefore, under the principle of complementarity, there shouldn't be an investigation by the ICC because we are carrying out genuine investigations into any alleged war crimes ourselves.
But Israel is claiming that the ICC is more than just a professional body. It's a political body.
Of course, it is. There are political pressure. There is political pressure, and we cannot. Everything in the UN has also some kind of political, or at least behind the scenes, there are political issues and pressures. But it is a professional body. The judges are professionals. The prosecutors are professional people. So it is not right to look at it only as a political body. This is not the UN General Assembly. It is a professional body. It might have some political bias, but I think the way forward is actually to deal with them as professionals, to be professional ourselves, and that would give us, I think, a good chances of ending this in the preliminary stage and not reach an investigation. I think we have a good case not to reach an investigation.
Any precaution measures need to be taken by soldiers or officers that fought in the recent war in Gaza in the meantime?
I think as long as we, first of all, abide by the rules, that covers us. I think to cooperate with investigations is also something that is good for us. And I really think that the soldiers, for sure, don't have to worry, even not junior commanders. The only ones that might maybe face something is anyway only the very senior commanders. And they, too, I think, shouldn't be too worried, because I really think we have a good case, both on the complementarity issue and both on the merits.
Retired Colonel Sharvit Baruch, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for now. Join us again next week for another Defense Magazine. Have a safe night from Jaffa Port. Good night.